You heard some of what Mr. Putin had to say. He is still unrepentant about Russia's move in Ukraine. I was wondering what your thoughts are.
Well, Mark, it's good to be here this afternoon with you. What Putin said is what can be expected to be said from him. At this stage of the game, he has a vested interest in his policy in Ukraine, and he'll make the case for it, whether it's in an international forum or in press interviews, that the Russians had a right to be involved in that situation. So I didn't expect anything different from what he had mentioned. The proof will be whether or not the Minsk agreement can be carried out and Russia's commitment to that agreement.
Sir, last night on CBS's 60 Minutes, President Putin told Charlie Rose that one of the reasons why Russia took the action in Ukraine was because of what he described as the unconstitutional removal of the prior president. Does his description of that action carry any weight in the international community?
I don't think that's exactly totally accurate. If you look back to February of 2014, when you had a number of European countries interfacing with the Ukrainians, both the opposition as well as President Yanukovych, they had come to an agreement. Unfortunately, after that agreement was signed, within 24 hours or so, President Yanukovych decided to flee the country, and he fled to Russia. So it was basically Yanukovych giving up the reins of power that left that huge vacuum that was filled by the interim government.
Sir, have the international sanctions on Russia had any impact, any significant impact as far as you can tell?
I remain a little skeptical in terms of the impact of the sanctions. I would say two things in reference to the sanctions. I think the price in oil, the drop in the price of oil has had more of an impact than the individual sanctions that we've placed on Russia. And secondly, I think some of the self-imposed sanctions that the Russians have instigated in retaliation against the West in terms of importing foodstuffs have had a greater impact. We've seen over the course of the months when the Russians did retaliatory sanctions, the price of foodstuffs in Moscow and throughout Russia have gone up. So that combination has probably had a greater impact than the sanctions that we placed on individuals or on organizations through the EU or through the United States bilaterally.
Ambassador Popadiuk, the meeting today between President Obama and President Putin, the White House has made it clear in the media that President Putin was the one who requested the meeting. If that is in fact the case, what does he hope to gain?
Well, I don't think it's important as to who requested the meeting or not. I think it's very important that two leaders of two such large nations are getting together to talk about this, about the world situation. If you look at it from the Putin side, I think Putin hopes to gain a number of things. Most of it will be optics. He can use the meeting to show his domestic audience that he is a key player, he is not isolated, and thereby show the strength that he has to the Russian people, that even though they're undergoing hardships, he is making Russia great again by having these very high-level meetings. And secondly, I think in terms of optics, it also plays to the international audience to show the international community that Russia is not isolated, that Russia indeed is a player. Here he is at the United Nations speaking to the whole world. Here he is speaking with the President of the United States. So the optics of it are very, very beneficial for the Russian side.
Sir, let's talk about some more optics. Today, during that speech at the UN, President Putin suggested that there be a ministerial meeting so everybody could be on the same page to combat ISIL. President Putin said, in fact, that the only people who are fighting Islamic State militants are Syria and the military forces of President Bashar Assad and the Kurds. Would such a ministerial meeting, first off, would it take pressure off of President Putin because of their support for Syria? And secondly, would the international community coalesce around such an idea and therefore send troops, send supplies, send armaments to fight Islamic State?
Well, you'd have to take a look at the details of any kind of proposal, but I think there is a fundamental problem in what President Putin has outlined, according to what you just mentioned, Mark, and that is that while the international community is united in the fight against ISIS or the Islamic State, the question is, what do you do with the Syrian government, President Assad? The Russians very much favor the maintenance of Assad in power. The United States has made clear that Assad Assad will have to leave the scene in order to get a sound political solution to the conflict that's ongoing in Syria. So the underlying problem in terms of dealing with ISIS is, what do you do with the Assad regime? And that could be something that's going to be a stumbling block in any kind of discussions that the West and the United States has with Russia.
Mr. Ambassador, I have about 20 seconds. I have to ask, are relations between the U.S. and Moscow as bad as we in the media make them out to be?
Well, I don't think they're as bad as a lot of people make them out to be. You have to realize that Russia played a constructive role in terms of the Iran situation, in terms of the nuclear agreement, and we'll have to see how it goes in terms of Syria. Obviously, the actions by Russia and the support of the separatists in eastern Ukraine and their annexation of Crimea has undermined the confidence of the international community in the Russian leadership. But I don't think we're at the situation where we're at cutthroat odds with each other as we were in the Cold War days. I think there's still room to maneuver. There's still room for both sides to talk, and hopefully there'll be room for political solutions to the Ukrainian situation as well as to the Syrian situation.